It was late afternoon, and I was cleaning my bedroom when I heard the door creak behind me. I turned around, and there was Alden standing in the doorway, staring at the thing in my hands. My heart stopped. How could I even begin to explain this? The object wasn't something you could just brush aside. I had pulled it out of the drawer only to dust the cabinet, not thinking much of it. I was sure I'd locked the door. Apparently, I hadn't. Alden was my 23-year-old stepson. He wasn't supposed to be home yet. He usually stayed late after work at the local brewery. But there he was, tall, lean, a quiet smirk playing on his lips. "What's that?" he asked, half teasing, half curious. I froze, heat rushing to my face. I dropped the item like it had burned me, grabbing a throw pillow to cover it. "It's none of your business," I muttered, trying to steady my voice. He leaned against the doorframe, still amused. "You don't have to act embarrassed," he said. "It's not like I haven't seen something like that before." The audacity. But behind the teasing tone was something else. An awareness. A new kind of attention I hadn't seen in him before. His gaze lingered too long, too focused. It wasn't the look of a boy anymore. I told him to leave. He lifted his hands, pretending to surrender. All right, all right. But before turning away, he gave me one last look, a look that stayed with me long after he left. When the door clicked shut, I sat on the edge of the bed, pillow clutched to my chest, my pulse thundering in my ears. The silence of the room felt charged, unfamiliar. Something invisible had shifted, and I knew I would never see Alden the same way again. That evening, I tried to shake it off. I cooked dinner, folded laundry, sat beside Victor, my husband, while he watched old westerns half asleep. But my thoughts kept wandering back to Alden. That smirk, those eyes, that sudden sense of being seen. Victor barely noticed. He hadn't for years. Since his retirement, our life had become a quiet routine of crossword puzzles and early bedtimes. I didn't resent him, not exactly, but the distance between us had long since turned into silence. Later, as I walked past the hallway, I caught Alden's shadow moving under his door. The faint sound of music seeped through, rhythmic and alive, so unlike the stillness that filled the rest of the house. My heart jumped for reasons I didn't understand. That night, as Victor snored softly beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling something I couldn't name. A restlessness that scared me almost as much as it thrilled me. And deep down, I knew it wasn't over. The next evening, the storm arrived early. Dark clouds pressing low over the neighborhood, wind rattling the windows as though something wanted to get in. Inside, the house felt smaller than usual, every sound sharper, every silence louder. Victor had fallen asleep in his recliner again, the soft rhythm of his snores competing with the rain outside. I sat in the living room with a book I wasn't reading, pretending not to hear Alden moving in the kitchen. Glass clinked. The refrigerator door opened and closed. Then footsteps, slow, unhurried, approached. "Whiskey?" he asked, holding two glasses. I hesitated. I don't usually drink this late. He smiled faintly. "Then tonight's a good night to start." He handed me the glass and sat across from me, the lamplight cutting soft lines across his face. There was something different about him, less teasing, more intent. His eyes searched mine in a way that made the air between us tighten. "What are you reading?" he asked, nodding toward the book. "Nothing important," I said. "Just something to fill the time." He tilted his head. "You sound like someone waiting for her life to start again." The words hit harder than I wanted them to. "That's an odd thing to say." "Maybe," he said, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "But you've got this look, like you're carrying 100 things you never talk about. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because he wasn't wrong. The room darkened as thunder rolled across the sky. Then, suddenly, the lights went out. The sound of rain grew louder in the blackout. "Oh," I muttered, standing up. "I'll get a flashlight." Before I could move, his hand brushed mine in the dark. A tiny accidental touch, but it sent a spark up my arm so sharp it felt electric. "Sorry," he murmured. "Don't be," I said, though my voice trembled. For a long moment, neither of us moved. I could feel his presence near me, his warmth, his breath, the awareness hanging between us like static before lightning. "Alden," I whispered, "this is a bad idea." "I know," he replied softly, "but sometimes bad ideas are the ones that make you feel alive." The next flash of lightning lit his face for a split second, earnest, uncertain, impossibly close. And then the darkness swallowed us again. When the power came back a few minutes later, I was standing near the window, staring into the storm. Alden sat quietly across from me, his gaze unreadable, his voice calm. "Nothing happened," he said. "Right?" I nodded, though we both knew the truth. Something had happened, something invisible but irreversible. That night, I dreamt of thunder and rain and a door I couldn't close. The next morning, sunlight broke through the clouds as if nothing had changed. But when Alden entered the kitchen and smiled at me over coffee, my pulse quickened all over again. The storm had passed outside. Inside, it had only begun. The days that followed were quiet, but nothing about them felt normal. Every morning, I'd hear Alden moving through the house, his footsteps in the hallway, the creak of the stairs, the sound of his voice greeting Victor at breakfast. Ordinary sounds, but they carried a weight now, as if every word held an echo of what hadn't been said that night. I tried to lose myself in routine, laundry, dishes, the garden, but his presence was everywhere, subtle and relentless. When he passed me a cup, his fingers brushed mine. When I caught him looking at me, he didn't look away. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was older, wiser, married. Yet my heart betrayed me every time it skipped a beat. Then, one morning, as I was pulling laundry from the dryer, Alden appeared in the doorway. "You're always working," he said. "Someone has to," I replied without turning. He stepped closer. "When's the last time someone took care of you?" The question froze me. My throat tightened as I turned, towel still clutched in my hands. "That's not something you should say." "Why not?" His tone softened. "You're human, Melina. You can admit you're lonely." I tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. The truth was too sharp to touch. He took another step closer, close enough that I could feel the air shift. "You deserve more than silence," he said quietly. That was the moment I realized how fragile I'd become, how easily kindness could feel like temptation when you've gone too long without it. Later that evening, I stood outside on the porch, watching the sky fade from gold to gray. Alden joined me, sitting a few feet away. Neither of us spoke at first. The world around us was calm, yet inside, I felt a storm brewing again. "I think you're scared," he said finally. "Of what?" "Of being seen, of wanting something you're told you shouldn't." His honesty was a mirror I didn't want to face. I turned to him, anger and sorrow mixing in my chest. "You don't understand," I said. "Some lines once crossed can never be erased." "Maybe," he replied. "But pretending the line isn't there doesn't make it go away either." I couldn't answer. My silence was its own confession. When Victor came home that night, his face was unreadable. He looked between us once, then simply said, "Dinner ready?" and walked past. But the weight of his glance said more than words ever could. That night, I didn't sleep. The house felt too full of ghosts, choices made, truths avoided, and a future I couldn't undo. By dawn, I'd decided. I packed a small bag, left a note on the table, and stepped outside before anyone woke. The air was cold, clean, alive. For the first time in years, I breathed deeply, not as a wife or a stepmother, but as a woman who had finally faced herself. If you were in her place, caught between duty and desire, what would you have done? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that explore the fragile line between right, wrong, and what the heart can't ignore.